Putin News Now. Is Putin finished? After a 24-hour mutiny by Wagner Group mercenaries led by Yevgeny Prigozhin and a march toward Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin called this week for unity. Putin called the rebellion's leaders traitors, and claimed they would have been suppressed anyway, but he insisted he gave them ample opportunity to change their minds before resorting to violence. Putin attempted to project stability by meeting with Russia's top security chiefs, including Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, whom Prigozhin wanted Putin to fire. While those with ties to the Kremlin in Russia were relieved that the uprising didn't turn into civil war, they all agreed that the armed mutiny by soldiers who had been instrumental in Russia's war effort in Ukraine posed the gravest threat yet to Putin's 23-year rule. A great deal of shame has been brought upon Putin. A Russian oligarch in good standing with Putin said as much to the Financial Times. From Rostov almost to Moscow, thousands of people are making their way with little to no opposition, and authorities are powerless to stop them. Then, Putin said they'd be punished, but nothing happened. That's the very definition of showing your hand. The uprising, according to Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, proved that Russia is an unpredictable state. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken claimed that cracks in Putin's armor were shown by the spectacle of his government defending Moscow against mercenaries of Putin's own making. Wagner forces have been an integral part of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is Putin's time finally coming to an end? Putin's aura of power was disrupted. According to Max Boot of The Washington Post, the Wagner mutiny revealed the hidden instability of Putin's regime and shook his aura of power. Also, if Putin and the Kremlin are diverted from the war in Ukraine by the infighting at home, it will only help Kyiv score more battlefield successes, which will only further weaken Putin's hold on power. This should serve as a warning to any future despots who might consider initiating aggressive wars. Xi Jinping, do you hear me? Moscow newspaper editor Konstantin Remchikov, who has ties to the Kremlin, told Anton Troyanovsky of The New York Times that this fiasco had damaged Putin's reputation as the person who provides stability and guarantees security to Russia's elite. This may encourage Putin's inner circle to try to dissuade him from seeking re-election next spring, a move they might not have dared make before. If a month ago I was sure that Putin would run unconditionally because it was his right, Remchikov said, now I see that the elites can no longer feel unconditionally secure. This could give Putin confidence. Senior fellow at the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Nonproliferation Nikolai Sokolov told Politico that this is not the beginning of the end for Putin. In fact, he may gain more backing from the armed forces as a whole, particularly from frontline generals and officers in addition to Shoigu and other top brass. Perhaps it even helped somewhat diffuse tensions that had been growing within the Russian body politic. Russian President Vladimir Putin may escalate hostilities in Ukraine to show to Ukrainians and to the West that he has not been weakened, as speculated by Serge Schmemann in The New York Times. Russia's war effort won't suffer if a few uniformed heads are lost as a result of purging incompetent generals. Putin could use this to justify an even more vicious crackdown against any Russians who question him or his war. Anne Applebaum of The Atlantic remarked on how telling it was that nobody seemed to mind, particularly that a brutal new warlord was threatening Putin's regime. Most of the time, a certain kind of autocrat, of whom Putin is the outstanding example, seeks to convince people to ignore politics. The Kremlin has unleashed the famous fire hose of falsehoods under Putin, making it impossible for the public to distinguish fact from fiction. The goal is to discourage them from participating in politics and to make protesting seem pointless. As a result, Putin now has complete control. But the side effect of apathy was on display, as civilians and soldiers alike stood aside to let Wagner advance unopposed on the capital. No one will support their leader, his ideology, or the war he wages, if they don't care about anything.